Evening and welcome to Thursday's 6-1.
The headlines this evening. Severe weather warnings along the west coast are now in force. 120-kilometre winds and torrential rain expected tonight.
Locals are bracing themselves for high winds and coastal flooding when the storm hits later tonight.
Three police officers are among 4 people killed by an attacker inside a police station in central Paris.
Brussels has told Boris Johnson the EU is unconvinced by his new backstop proposals but is still open to talks.
And Ireland's bonus point win against Russia keeps hopes alive for a place in the quarter-finals. Storm Lorenzo is bearing down on the west and southwest coast of Ireland this evening. The storm's centre is due to move up to the northwest coast later on. The National Emergency Coordination Group has reiterated serious concern about its impact, and the advice is to stay back, stay high and stay dry. People are being warned of high winds and the risk of trees being brought down. A Met Éireann orange wind warning is in effect for 5 counties: Kerry, Limerick, Clare, Galway and Mayo. The warning will remain in place until 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. We'll be getting live updates from our reporters along the western seaboard. First, this report from our environment correspondent George Lee on what we can expect.
As Storm Lorenzo began to make its presence felt on the western seaboard early today, there were 3 pieces of good news that came from Met Éireann. Firstly, the risk of thunder and lightning with the storm had diminished. Secondly, they felt more certain that the storm was going to pass the country relatively quickly. And thirdly, County Cork had been removed from the list of counties who were in the orange warning area. The bad news, however, was for the other 5 counties on the western seaboard affected by the orange weather warning. The period of maximum risk had been extended from 9 to 12 hours, and it will not be lifted until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning.
A status orange is a serious condition. It may pose a threat to life and safety. Our primary concern is the west and northwest coasts. There is a threat of wave surges and coastal flooding. Extremely high seas are predicted later today and into this evening, with 9 p.m. today being the key time.
Met Éireann reported that its M3 Atlantic buoy has risen from 3 to 8 metres, indicating waves higher than a 2-storey house out in the Atlantic. They also made it clear that they expect Lorenzo to make landfall proper between Errishead and Killala Bay in County Mayo, but not until after midnight tonight or soon after that.
As it begins to move in over Ireland, it's going to rapidly decrease in intensity. So the peak of the winds will be in the west and in the southwest, and between about 6 or 7 o'clock this evening and 3, 4 or 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. So it's a very short-lived affair.
Around the coast, one of the big fears now is about the damage that might occur when the high tide arrives later this evening.
So the high tide tonight around here is about 9:15, similar in Galway. Just to stay back, stay clear, because we're not sure yet how big the seas are going to get around that time. That's when it's really picking up. So please stay back, stay nice high ground and stay dry.
The National Emergency Coordination Group will meet tomorrow at noon to assess the damage Lorenzo will have left in its wake. George Lee, RTE News.
Now, local authorities have activated their crisis management teams in preparation for the arrival of Storm Lorenzo. Emergency services are continuing to advise people to stay away from all coastal areas, and motorists are being urged to slow down and to be vigilant. Our Western correspondent Pat McGrath joins us now from Spanish Point in County Clare. Pat, we're hearing the storm is starting to bear down on the west coast. What's the latest there in County Clare?
Well, throughout the afternoon, Eileen, winds have been building. If you stand, we were on the shoreline in Lahinch a short time ago, and the wind would nearly take your breath away as it whips in from the Atlantic. Throughout the whole day, communities right along the western seaboard have been battening down the hatches and making preparations ahead of Storm Lorenzo making landfall later this evening.
Ready to rock.
Recently upgraded coastal defences along the promenade in Lahinch are set to be tested tonight as the West Clare Resort braces for the arrival of Storm Lorenzo. Businesses here have been taking precautions to avoid a repeat of recent years when sea surges caused extensive damage to properties in the town.
During this summer and last winter, the County Council have done extensive works along the prom to ensure that there's rock wall there to protect us from storms such as this one should it get bad.
The situation here mirrored along the Atlantic coastline. Throughout the day, winds have been picking up with offshore conditions off Kerry and elsewhere worsening as the hours pass. Local authority crews have been working since first light to safeguard coastal areas from flooding. In Galway, an aquadam has been erected close to the Spanish Arch in advance of tonight's high tide. And around the city, people have been picking up sandbags from a number of designated collection points.
We also have been in contact overnight with the homeless services in town. They've made contact with rough sleepers and we're ensuring that they're going to be looked after tonight and can come indoors tonight.
Flood protection measures in Limerick too, amid concerns that the Shannon could breach existing defences. In Waterford, Tramore Promenade was closed this afternoon, while seafarers in Castletown Bear in County Cork have heeded warnings to stay in port until the storm passes. That advice will remain in place until at least tomorrow morning as people across the region prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
So, Pat, what's the short-term advice then for people if, as predicted, Storm Lorenzo is set to get worse as the night goes on?
Well, it's quite simply to stay indoors and don't go out unless you absolutely have to. Many playgrounds, libraries and parks operated by Limerick County and City councils closed early today. That example as well was followed by many businesses here in County Clare. Lots of shops had sandbags out by 4 o'clock and had shut the doors for the evening. So the advice being heeded. The local authorities are monitoring the situation throughout the evening. They will be on hand to deal with fallen trees. ESB crews also on standby to deal with fallen power lines. But the clear advice being reiterated time and again by all local authorities who are tasked with overseeing the response in each particular area that they have jurisdiction over is to stay indoors and to avoid going out unless you absolutely have to. The effort made by emergency services brought into sharp focus and shown very clearly today by the RNLI making medical evacuation from Inishmaan when a lady took ill there. She was taken back to Rossaveel Harbour in force 8, winds and storm surges of 3.5 metres. There are people, emergency services, making an appeal to people not to put their lives at risk and not to put the lives of emergency services personnel at risk either as this storm rolls in over the country later tonight.
All right, Pat McGrath in a very windy Spanish Point. Thank you.
Let's see what's happening right now in some of the areas expected to be worst affected by Storm Lorenzo. We're joined by Theresa Mannion, who's in Galway, Shane O'Correen on Inishmore on the Aran Islands, and Kieran Malooly, who's in Belmullet in County Mayo for us this evening. Theresa, to you first, what are you seeing there in terms of the approach of Storm Lorenzo?
Well, Ray, I don't know if you can see, but the wind and the rain has really whipped up substantially here in Salt Hill in the past hour. The Salt Hill prom is now closed and it will remain closed until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning in line with the extended orange weather warning. The car parks in the vicinity and the roads are also closed. And for those drivers who didn't heed Galway City Council, their cars have been towed away this afternoon. Now, Storm Lorenzo hasn't quite made landfall here yet, but we're expecting gusts and gales of up to 130 kilometres per hour. And Galway is bracing itself for high tide, which is due here tonight at 9:15. But as you heard there in earlier reports, precautionary measures are in place. A boom has been installed at the Spanish Arch to prevent the kind of catastrophic flooding that we saw in the city in storms in previous years. And the local authorities have also distributed 20,000 sandbags at locations around the city and county, and they will be on hand at 6 a.m. in the morning for the expected clean-up.
OK, thank you. Shane O'Coreen is on Inishmore on the Aran Islands. Shane, can you describe the level of preparation underway there? Agus an I'm sure Inish.
Re Nilan Amshiro Gunnan Shaw Fullaharna Hure, the favourite shock for Eternona, Augustini Dreamlish and Lan Warren Shaw knocked Harter, Tahritration Lee. The Aran Islanders are well versed and well experienced in handling adverse weather conditions. And I've been told all week that fishermen have lifted lobster pots, fishing nets and boats have been tied to piers. From 10:30 this morning, all scheduled flights and sailings to and from the Aran Islands have been cancelled. We got the last ferry out there at 10:30 this morning and there was a 3.5 metre swell and gale force state winds in it at that time. A decision regarding tomorrow morning's flights and sailings will be made in the morning pending the outcome of the storm overnight. It's been quiet enough here on Inishmore during the day. Very few tourists about. The Dunangus office has been closed during the day. And local fishermen have been talking to them during the day and they've been saying 9:15 tonight, high tide. And it's between 10 and 2 a.m. this morning that they may be expecting the worst of it is to come. And they're concerned that if there's a south-southeasterly wind, that's where they'll be slightly concerned. Talking to local RNLI Clue, they're expecting winds of 50-55 miles an hour tonight, and as a lady in the local shop put it earlier, it's time for the sitting in front of the TV.
Shane Guramagat, Kieran, what's the situation on the Mayo coast?
Ray, there's a waiting game going on here in North Mayo. The local authority issued their level 3 warning this afternoon. They're pretty much concerned, particularly about coastal flooding in this area. They're worried about what might happen at 8:30 or thereabouts this evening when high tide is due in this part. I'm here with Blacksod Bay is behind me at the moment and we're taking shelter behind the RNLI lifeboat station. Believe me, it is extremely windy here already. They estimate over 60 kilometres per hour is the wind speed at the moment. And they also have indications of trouble ahead because during the afternoon Met Éireann have their own gauges on working behind me here a little bit further north at Annock Head, where they gauged this afternoon that they had an 8.5 metre high wave at that point. That was before 4 o'clock this afternoon. That's the height of a 2-storey house by any standards around the country, and that's before the wind and the storm hits proper, so to speak, later on. So it's a waiting game. The local authorities have told people to stay in, keep away from the sea, keep away from the ports, keep away from anything at all in terms of trouble this evening. But there have been casualties already. Knock Airport's flights to London Gatwick cancelled already, and the word from the Gardaí and from the authorities is to stay at home and to batten down the hatches and wait and see what develops later on.
Kieran Maluli, Shane O'Correen and Theresa Mannion, thank you.
And we'll have more updates on Storm Lorenzo from around the country and from Met Éireann later in the programme. And of course, we'll also have full coverage online, on radio and later this evening on the 9 o'clock news. Now, still to come this evening, the High Court in Belfast rules that Northern Ireland's strict abortion law breaches the UK's human rights commitments.
And in sports news, a bonus point win over Russia, but still room for improvement for Ireland. And the Irish show jumping team remain on course for Olympic qualification.
4 people have been killed in an attack at a police headquarters in central Paris. It's understood the attacker, who was shot dead by the authorities, worked in the building in administration.
It's the deadliest attack on police in France in years. Around 1 o'clock local time, a man armed with a knife stormed police headquarters here in the heart of Paris.
It happened very, very quickly. We are on the first floor. We went down. It happened where we used to work. Colleagues are very shocked.
Inside, an emergency message was broadcast over loudspeakers as people were evacuated. 4 people were stabbed to death. Another person was wounded.
We deplore the death of 4 people. 3 police officers and 1 administrative employee were killed.
The 45-year-old man, who has not been named, was shot dead by police. He was an employee in the building, and officials said there had been no warning signs.
This colleague, who was the attacker, was an administrative colleague who has been in-house for 20 years. His last position was in intelligence services.
It comes only a day after police went on strike across the country over increasing violence towards officers. There has been no official statement so far on a possible motive for the attack. Authorities this evening are searching the home of the man and a murder investigation has been launched. Jackie Fox, RTÉ News.
The President of the European Council has said he remains fully behind Ireland and is unconvinced by British proposals to secure a fresh Brexit deal. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has told MPs he had tabled a compromise aimed at bridging the chasm on Brexit. From Westminster, our London correspondent Sean Whelan sent us this report.
It may be stormy in Ireland, but here in Westminster it's calm, including inside the chamber where Prime Minister Johnson gave a very measured, dignified, statesmanlike performance in setting out his new proposal to the European Union and explaining it to members of Parliament. He also addressed the EU, saying he'd compromised in his proposal and inviting them to do the same.
If our European neighbours choose not to show a corresponding willingness to reach a deal, then we shall have to leave on October the 31st without an agreement. And we are ready to do so.
Eurosceptic Tory backbenchers signalled they will back the proposal, as will the DUP, suggesting a few Labour defectors would be enough to get the new plan through Westminster. But the Labour leader thinks not.
No Labour MP could support such a reckless deal that would be used as a springboard to attack rights and standards in this country.
While there was plenty of concern about how the proposal would impact on Northern Ireland, only one MP from the region was present.
While the Prime Minister is perfectly happy, it seems, to dance to the tune of his friends in the Democratic Unionist Party, he forgets or he chooses to ignore the fact, and it is a fact, that the DUP does not represent the majority of people in Northern Ireland.
Meanwhile, the Taoiseach was in Sweden, meeting his opposite number ahead of the EU summit.
I'm reassured by what Prime Minister Johnson said today, that he's not proposing that there should be any new physical infrastructure on the island of Ireland linked to customs or customs checks. But as you pointed out, Tony, that is actually in contradiction to the papers presented by the UK government yesterday.
The storms were on the other side of the Irish Sea. In the Dáil, the Taoiseach Simon Coveney indicated the Johnson plan will fail unless it's changed, identifying customs and the possibility of one party in Northern Ireland having an effective veto on staying in the single market.
Well, I'm very disappointed in his comments. They are actually quite outrageous, and when they're put alongside the Irish Prime Minister's comments in Stockholm, we can see how intransigent the Irish government are in relation to what are very reasonable and sensible and proposals that could actually make a difference.
And in Brussels, Michel Barnier briefed diplomats on the proposal. If he gets the go-ahead, he'll go into what they call the tunnel, an intense and secret negotiation with the British. Sean Whelan, RTÉ News, London.
An Taoiseach Leo Varadkar has spoken to the European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker and the European Council President Donald Tusk this afternoon. The calls took place following the Taoiseach's meeting with the Swedish Prime Minister Stefan Löfven. Our Europe editor Tony Connolly was at the joint news conference held by the two leaders in Stockholm.
Well, you could see that Leo Varadkar was once again relatively measured in his response, saying he welcomed some of the elements of the UK proposals, but obviously had some concerns about the nature of physical customs checks, where they would be, what kind of infrastructure that might require. And this is in keeping with, I think, the EU as a whole trying not to slam the door on these proposals, but still making sure that the UK understands that there are severe problems with some of the proposals. But I think there was a more significant intervention today by the European Parliament Brexit Steering Group, which issued a statement saying it had grave concerns about the UK papers. Firstly, that they gave rise to customs checks and controls on the island of Ireland that would disrupt one of the key objectives of the backstop, but also the Good Friday Agreement, and that is protecting the all-Ireland economy. And the point was made that this actually was in breach of a resolution passed by the European Parliament itself. The Parliament also raised concerns about the fact that a lot of these ideas to mitigate the impact of customs checks were simply not legally operable yet, and that that left a real problem of uncertainty going into the future. And the third major concern they had was over the idea that the Northern Ireland Assembly and Stormont executive would have to give its consent. Now, the point was made that the Assembly hasn't sat for quite some time, and it wasn't entirely appropriate that a regional body like this would be able to give its veto for an international treaty. And of course, it's worth reminding people that the European Parliament also has to ratify any new withdrawal agreement or any new treaty that has a protocol embedded in it. So that is something that is a much more overt statement of concern than we have seen from European leaders and the European Commission so far.
The Minister for Health has said there is no room for complacency over the impact of Brexit on medicine supplies here. Simon Harris said that while no shortages had been flagged by health authorities, the situation would need ongoing monitoring and vigilance.
The HSE has reviewed around 6,500 critical medicines to identify vulnerable supply lines with the threat posed by Brexit. Today, the Minister for Health, Simon Harris, met with health organisations to discuss preparations. He said Ireland would be vigilant in monitoring medicine supplies.
So I am satisfied in terms of the state of preparedness of the health service in relation to medicines and medical devices, but we do need to be very much aware that Brexit, should it happen, is a permanent state of change and will therefore require constant and ongoing vigilance.
The areas where there are potential risks involve medicines with a short shelf life, refrigerated supplies and medicines made up for specific patients. The HSE has warned of the risks in getting some medical devices due to regulatory rather than supply issues, and so extra stocks have been secured. The pharmaceutical industry said today that no one should stockpile medicines.
The industry has spent hundreds of millions of euro preparing for this, and the advice on stockpiling is basically, please don't. It would to everyone's benefit if we all continue as we are and trust our advice of our pharmacists and our doctors.
Ireland has a 6-month supply of vaccines, and none of our vaccines are supplied through the UK. Health authorities insist there's no short-term risk to the supply of medicines. But no one can say for certain what will happen in the long term because of the potential to disruption to supply routes for medicines due to Brexit. Fergal Bowers, RTE News at the Department of Health.
Belfast's High Court has ruled that Northern Ireland's abortion law breaches the UK's human rights commitments. The decision came as the result of a challenge taken by a woman who challenged the law after she was denied a termination in Northern Ireland and travelled to Great Britain.
As a result of a vote by a majority of Westminster MPs, abortion will cease to be a criminal offence in Northern Ireland after the 21st of October. The matter before Belfast's High Court today has been working its way through Northern Ireland's legal system for a number of years. 28-year-old Sarah Ewart said she went to England for an abortion because her unborn child had no chance of survival. In Northern Ireland, under the soon-to-change laws, a termination in cases of fatal fetal abnormality is not available. Mrs Justice Keegan ruled that the applicant had been affected by Northern Ireland's current law in that she had to travel to seek an abortion in desperate circumstances.
This hasn't been an easy journey, but we've had lots of journeys back and forward through Westminster and the courts here in Stormont, so massive relief today.
Pro-life organisations had followed the High Court proceedings and were disappointed by the outcome.
This is certainly not the end of the road. We need to create safe places of safety for unborn children with fetal abnormality and their mothers.
Interested parties will now turn their attention to Stormont. If Northern Ireland's politicians want to influence the abortion provisions that will come into effect here, they have until October the 21st to agree a power-sharing deal. Otherwise, Westminster, through the Northern Ireland Secretary, will have the decisive role. He will decide the laws that will apply here after April the 1st next. Tommy Gorman, RTE News, Stormont.
Now, still to come this evening, the latest on Storm Lorenzo. We'll be speaking to Jerry Murphy from Met Éireann and Gary McMahon, Communications Manager with Galway City Council.
And Irish butter, cheese and liqueurs are set to be hit by US tariffs.
Join us after the break.
Welcome back. The main news this evening. Storm Lorenzo is forecast to bring strong winds and large waves along western and southern coasts tonight. Met Éireann has extended its orange status wind warnings for counties Kerry, Limerick, Clare, Galway and Mayo until 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. 4 people have been killed in an attack at the police headquarters in the centre of the French capital, Paris. It's understood the knife-wielding attacker, who was shot dead by police, was employed as an administrative worker in the building. And the President of the European Council has said he remains fully behind Ireland and is unconvinced by British proposals to secure a fresh Brexit deal. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said he's made a genuine attempt to bridge the chasm to strike a fresh Brexit deal with the European Union.
Well, now for the latest on Storm Lorenzo, we're joined here in studio by Jerry Murphy of Met Éireann and Gary McMahon, who's Communications Manager with Galway City Council. Thank you both very much for joining us on 6-1 this evening. First to you, Jerry, how is the storm progressing? Are we still expecting the worst of it to hit tonight?
Yes, indeed, Eileen. The storm, the warnings are very much the same for the most significantly affected counties. That's counties Kerry, Clare, Limerick, Galway and Mayo. You can see the storm centre there off the northwest coast. And then if we look at the graphics, there's the centre at the moment. And as we move into tonight, those strongest winds will continue to affect those western counties up as between Kerry and Mayo. Now, the most up-to-date information suggests that the storm is actually slowing down a bit, which means that the yellow warnings for wind have changed somewhat. So we now have a yellow warning in operation for tonight for Sligo and Leitrim, and the yellow warning for the southern counties has actually been removed. So mainly the orange warning for Kerry, Clare, Limerick, Galway, Mayo, and now we have a yellow wind warning for Sligo and Leitrim. For the rest of the country, the winds won't be that significant. However, we will also see some heavy rain overnight, which will affect mainly Connacht, Ulster and Leinster.
So you're saying it's not as bad as was initially predicted?
No, it's as bad in the counties where we have the orange warning. That has to be made very clear. That's still a very, very significant storm for those counties. What I'm saying is further to the east, it won't be the winds won't be exceptionally strong, and the track of the storm now suggests that there will be strong winds for a time in Sligo and Leitrim, but that's slightly further north, so the winds won't be quite as strong in Cork and Tipperary.
But in the areas worst affected, you're talking strong winds, coastal surges, gusts.
Yes, absolutely. In those western coastal counties, from Kerry up to Mayo, it's still an orange warning. The wind, it will actually last even longer than was expected. It's going to last right the way through the night until the early morning, and the very significant strong winds up to 130 kilometres per hour with very high waves pushing in off the coast as well.
Now, your weather boy in the Atlantic, which collects weather data, has been showing some interesting data. What's it showing already this evening?
Well, there are 2 buoys that have been reporting quite significant waves. The one off the southwest coast has been showing waves of up to 5 metres high, and the one further out in the Atlantic off the west coast, but that's very far out. That was producing waves of up to 9 metres. But those waves won't be as high when they reach the coast because the waves are attenuated as they move closer to the coast and wash into the shore. Having said that, still, we are talking about very high waves and what we call overtopping, where the waves crashes onto the shore and possibly may bring some flooding coupled with those strong winds. So really the message for those counties along the west coast is to stay away from the coast itself. Do not take any unnecessary journeys and stay very safe. And also be aware that the trees are still in full leaf at this time of the year. The ground has been quite wet, so there is a risk of falling trees and debris as well.
Well, let's go to Gary McMahon now from Galway City Council. Gary, Galway and the West are well used to storms. How prepared are you for this one?
Well, we hope we're as prepared as we could be. We've contingency plans in place. All our measures are in place. They include, as Teresa mentioned earlier on, the boom at the Spanish Arch Fish Market area, which was going to hopefully prevent some of the flooding up onto the roads in the city centre area. Here in Salthill, you can see, as if on cue at 6 o'clock, the wind came up, the rain came out, and the storm surges are starting into the bay. But we're still 2.5 hours away from high tide, which behind me here, all those beaches will be full. And as Jerry mentioned, they will be overtopping onto the Promenade Road. We still have some traffic going through, but we're going to be shutting that down in the next couple of minutes with the cooperation of the Gardaí and the Civil Defence. We're basically advising people stay at home. You don't need to be out in this. Don't be brave. Don't be foolish. Don't come out and try and take photographs. Don't get in the water. And we're looking after homeless people on the streets. Our homeless services have been out with local agencies overnight, making sure that people will come in out of the storm tonight. We're trying as best as we can to mitigate the circumstances, but as this storm comes in, all we can hope is that we're not too badly hit. We expect overtopping, we expect some flooding, but we also, as Jerry mentioned, we're quite concerned about trees, about how they may, on sodden ground, they may be blown over. And tomorrow morning, as people emerge from this and as the winds die down, be careful as you're moving about and heading out to school or to work.
All right, Gary McMahon, sound advice from Galway City Council. Thank you very much. And Jerry Murphy for joining us in studio tonight. Now, we'll have further coverage of Storm Lorenzo here tonight and tomorrow morning, with up-to-the-minute coverage online, on radio and, of course, on the 9 o'clock TV news. Morning Ireland will be on air from 7 a.m. tomorrow with the very latest on the impact of Storm Lorenzo from our reporters right across the country. And there will also be a special TV news programme on Storm Lorenzo here on RTE1 and on the RTE News Now channel tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.
Irish food and drink producers have expressed concern at a decision by the United States to apply new tariffs to a range of goods being imported into the US from the EU. Irish butter, cheese, liqueurs and pork products are among hundreds of goods that could be impacted.
It began as a spat over aircraft, but it now threatens to become a full-blown EU-US trade war. First, the World Trade Organization ruled the EU failed to end subsidies for aircraft maker Airbus. Then it authorised the US to impose duties worth $7.5 billion on European goods. And now the US has begun doing just that. Among the hundreds of products that may be hit by 25% tariffs are Irish butter, cheeses and yoghurt. Liqueurs and Irish whisky made in Northern Ireland are also included, although whisky made in the Republic has been spared. While pork products originating here, as well as certain shellfish, will also attract the extra tariffs.
The development is bad news for food and drink producers here, who collectively export around €1 billion worth of goods to the US every year. And they're concerned.
We are concerned that we're now facing both trade wars in the US, but also in terms of Brexit, in terms of market access, and obviously also things around actual supply chains across the border.
It's definitely a concern because the US is a premium market for mainly our butter, but also our cheese. We have the Kerrygold brand being the second largest butter brand sales in America last year.
President Trump welcomed the development, describing it as a nice victory. But the EU suggested retaliation's likely.
In the parallel Boeing case, the EU will in some months equally be granted rights to impose countermeasures against the United States as a result of its continued failure to comply with WTO rules.
The tariffs are due to take effect from October 18th, but in the meantime both sides say they are willing to negotiate a solution which it's hoped will prevent a full-blown trade dispute taking flight. Will Goodbody, RTE News.
Both the Labour and Green parties published their alternative budgets today ahead of Finance Minister Paschal Donoghue's address to the Dáil on Tuesday. Labour wants to raise €250 million by raising the levy on banks, while the Greens have proposed spending more than €1 billion on developing a low-carbon economy.
The Green Party says that Ireland needs to be carbon neutral by 2030, and next week's budget must be the first step in achieving that goal. It proposes a €1.1 billion green investment, nearly half of that amount being spent on public transport.
We're on the start of a 10-year path to completely changing the Irish economy for the better, both environmentally and socially, and that's what this budget submission is about.
Labour's revenue-raising measures include withdrawing income tax credits for incomes more than €100,000 and increasing the levy on banks to raise €250 million.
We're saying that we need to put a levy on the banks because they're not paying corporate taxes, because they're writing off their losses against corporate taxes. We need to put a levy on them until they pay back what's due to the Irish people.
The party would allocate €700 million on health. Labour argues the state needs to spend more in order to secure efficiencies.
I believe it'll take at least 5 years. It'll take at least 3 to 4 years on the current side to deal with the issues in relation to consultants, GP care and across a whole range of other things. On the capital side, it'll take more than 5 years. It'll probably take somewhere in the region of 7 to 9 years.
The Labour Party said it would raise the carbon tax by €10 a tonne. The Green Party said it would go as far as €20 a tonne. The government will announce its decision on Tuesday. Paul Cunningham, RT News, Leinster House.
Now, still to come this evening, well-versed Catherine Ann Cullen is appointed Poetry Ireland's first poet in residence.
And here in Kobe, Ireland secure a bonus point win over Russia with a 5-try performance.
Welcome back. The main news again this evening. 4 people have been killed in an attack at the police headquarters in Paris. It's understood the knife-wielding attacker who was shot dead by police was employed as an administrative worker in the building.
The National Emergency Coordination Group has reiterated serious concern about the impact of Storm Lorenzo, particularly in coastal areas along the west and southwest coast. A Met Éireann orange wind warning is in effect for 5 counties: Kerry, Limerick, Clare, Galway and Mayo. Will remain in force until early tomorrow morning. Well, let's get the latest now from County Donegal. Fran McNulty is in Killybegs. Fran, can you bring us up to date with what you're seeing there?
Well, Ray, we're feeling the effects of the storm here for some hours now. Killybegs is relatively sheltered, but since early today, fishing vessels have been coming in seeking safe harbour. One vessel here from Germany, another from Spain. Some more vessels, foreign vessels, have come in here today. Many Irish vessels also dotted around the harbour. They have lifted their nets, they are tied up and they're going to ride out this storm in safe harbour. There is an impact of that because as a result of that, there's a shortage of fish at some processing facilities. We've confirmed this evening that several of the facilities here in Killybegs have ceased production. Up to 200 people have been temporarily laid off because in particular sprat is not available for processing. Many are hoping that that situation will ease when the storm dies away. We've also had reports this evening that one fleet of Japanese trawlers has decided to stay at sea. They're fishing for tuna around 300 kilometres off the Donegal coast, but they view this storm as being short and sharp, yes, perhaps intense, and they say because of that they are hoping they can ride it out at sea. But the worst certainly has yet to come here in Donegal, but people are braced here. They're tied up and they're prepared for what's yet to come.
Fran, thank you. Sean McEntee is now in Ballydavid in County Kerry. Sean, what's the expectation of people there overnight?
Well, after a very rough morning, we had high winds and heavy seas from about 6 o'clock in the morning on. It calmed significantly then during the day, but in the last hour or so you can certainly sense it picking up again. And I suppose we've been following Lorenzo as it made its way outside us here in the Atlantic up north. And the expectation is that it will come across the country, and the worry in places like here down in Kerry is that there might be a sting in the tail, bringing high winds again later tonight and a lot of rain. Coastal flooding is a possibility. As well as that, you have high tide at around 9 o'clock tonight, and areas which have experienced a lot of flooding in the past like Cremon, Rospa and potentially the Maharees on the northern side of the peninsula here will be on high alert. Kerry County Council has a severe weather management plan in place. It has just met, I believe, and they have crews ready throughout the county, ready to respond to any eventuality.
Sean McEntee in Kerry and Fran McNulty in Donegal. Thank you both for those updates.
And now Dave's here with all the sports news.
Eileen, thank you. Well, a bonus point win was the aim and a bonus point win was achieved. Despite, however, beating Russia 35 points to 0, the overall quality of today's Irish performance has been questioned. Paul O'Flynn has more details.
Well, this game against Russia was never likely to decide Ireland's World Cup prospects one way or the other, but in the heat and humidity here in Kobe, they got the job done, they secured the bonus point and they now move on in good spirits. After all the talk of roofs open or roofs closed, Irish fans were singing in the rain in Kobe ahead of the must-win clash with Russia.
Come on, Ireland! The atmosphere is going to be good. I think the team are going to push it now after the last result. They're going to give it their all.
It's good so far. The gang is just after gathering now, so hopefully it could be a good match.
Yeah, it should be a win. It should be a good win. Should definitely be confidence back in the sails. Hopefully there's no injuries and everyone just performs.
Inside, it was hardly any drier, as the heat and humidity of the indoor arena made it hot and sweaty and the ball hard to handle. But it made little difference to Rob Kearney as he slipped through for the opening try after just 90 seconds. Sexton then showed a touch of class to kick into space behind, O'Mahony gratefully accepting the gift. Just days after landing in Japan, Geordie Murphy was soon in the wars and off the field. Just past the hour, with Russia down to 14, Rhys Ruddock bundled over to put Ireland in charge, 21-0 up, and with 3 kicks from 3, Sexton was called ashore to keep him fresh for another day. But Ireland struggled after the break with a sloppy 20 minutes, nerves growing that the 4th try may not come. A super break from Andrew Conway made sure of the bonus, before Ringrose added an insurance 5th try, 35-0, the final score. Injuries to Joey Carberry, Geordie Murphy and Rob Kearney remain a worry. For now, Ireland are back on track, but there'll be much bigger tests ahead.
The biggest gap was waiting for that 4th try, and that was a bit nerve-wracking. You know, you get into that final quarter and you've made a number of line breaks and you think that it's almost going to happen and it doesn't. But, you know, in the context of the quality of the tries we scored, I'm delighted. You always want more, but a 35-point margin is pretty good.
But there's still some question marks about Ireland's performance levels as experts and fans reacted afterwards.
I think it's deflating, to be honest. I mean, we started so well against Scotland and, you know, the performance that day was back to levels that we hadn't seen for quite some time. Maybe the Japanese result took a little bit more out of us than we thought. Certainly the confidence didn't seem to be there. Russia defended really well against us. They didn't resource the ruck and we kept running into heavy Russian bodies. You can't escape the fact that if it was a New Zealand or a South Africa that was out there tonight, they'd be winning those games by a margin of 60 plus points.
I think they kind of they got the bonus point, and I was expecting a bit more than that, but they kind of did that and kind of felt like they almost left it there a little bit.
Oh, I thought it was a great game. We were delighted to get the bonus point with the tries. We were sweating there for a little while, weren't we?
Yeah.
But it was a great game.
Yeah, really
great
good.
atmosphere. It was like a home game.
Really good atmosphere. Everyone did really well, and a full house as well. So well done to the Russians. They really put up against us, and you know, great tournament. So well done.
So in the hot and sticky conditions here, it's job done for Ireland. They now have 9 days to rest, recover and prepare for their next game against Samoa, where another bonus point is expected, and then most likely it's all eyes on the quarter-finals.
Fiji have their first win at this year's World Cup after back-to-back defeats to Australia and Uruguay. Fiji had a comfortable bonus point win today over Georgia. They scored 7 tries in total in a 45-10 win. The Irish show jumpers are one step closer to Olympic qualification. Dara Kenny, Peter Maloney, Cian O'Connor and Paul O'Shea have reached Sunday's Nations League World Final in Barcelona. The Irish team finished 5th in today's opening qualifying competition. They must finish ahead of Colombia and Italy in Sunday's 8-nation final to qualify for Tokyo. And finally, a reminder, Kieran McGeehan goes at 9 p.m. in Doha in the semi-finals of the 1,500 metres at the World Athletics Championships.
Now, the poet Catherine Ann Cullen has been appointed Poetry Ireland's first poet in residence. For the next 2 years, she'll be working with community groups across Dublin's North Inner City.
My name is Catherine Ann Cullen and I've just been appointed the first poet in residence in Poetry Ireland.
Students at Marino College of Further Education in North Strand in Dublin had a surprise visitor this lunchtime as poet Catherine Ann Cullen told them about her new role.
I am not afraid of any season. I contain a whole world.
As poet in residence in the North Inner City, she'll be working with community organisations, including a group of former prisoners, schools and colleges, and newer residents of the city.
This area and the Docklands area is very much, has always been an area of high immigration for hundreds and hundreds of years. So people who've been here since old God's time and people who are recently here really look forward to working with them all and hearing their stories.
These students appreciated the chance to meet a poet in person.
It's very rare usually reading about a poet. It's very rare you actually get to meet one, talk to them and see what they're actually like.
Do you think it's a good idea that there will be a poet working in this local area?
Oh yeah, definitely, especially for like students in 6th year and 4th years to be more inspired as well to learn about poems and maybe even to write poems.
This part of Dublin is also home to the Five Lamps Arts Festival.
Maybe people don't go to poetry readings, but maybe now that we have a poet in residence in the area, that poet can come to where the people are, and we need to make, I think people that are interested in the arts need to make it as accessible as possible.
Catherine Ann will be based in Poetry Ireland's headquarters on Parnell Square. Her residency will last for 2 years. Sinead Crowley, RTE News.
Now let's stick with Storm Lorenzo again, and our environment correspondent George Lee is with us in studio. George, bring us up to date on what the latest position is and reiterate again, if you will, how important it is for people to heed the warnings that are being issued.
Well, obviously people are feeling the effects of this already in the western counties where the orange warning is, and remember that this storm isn't going to hit landfall until midnight or thereafter. It's coming in at Mayo, it's going down to the southeast, that's the trajectory of it, and out towards Wexford. And to give you an indication, already this afternoon somebody in Wexford in Rosslare area has already a kite surfer taking advantage of the high winds, has come a cropper, really, unfortunately. Significant problem.
Some pictures from that incident.
Significant problem with the airlift. He had to be airlifted as his kite surfer was smashed up against the rocks, and a serious injury there to that particular person. And that is on the other side of the country before any of this storm actually even arrives on land. So that shows you how significant and dangerous it is. So it's going to the trajectory is like that, and the HSA is very worried now as well, and so will the National Emergency Coordination Group be very worried about what happens now tomorrow morning. Particularly concerned about chainsaws and people dealing with fallen trees, because there are frequently accidents in relation to that, and they're hoping and urging that people who are using chainsaws tomorrow, or to clear trees or anything like that, or any construction work or any repair work, have expertise in relation to it and take enormous care. The Gardaí are saying to drivers, particularly overnight, of high-sided vehicles, of overnight couriers, of truck drivers, remember there's an orange warning out there. Orange means take action. If you look at a traffic light and you see orange, you're supposed to do something, slow down and take action. And they're saying that's the message to drivers out there. They're looking also for people in areas, in communities, to look after vulnerable and older people and to check in on them. And right across the board, it is caution, caution, caution. And we'll have to wait until tomorrow at 12 o'clock when the National Emergency Coordination Group is going to meet to assess where we are after this big storm has passed.
OK, George, thank you.
And a reminder again, you can keep up to date with the latest on Storm Lorenzo online, on radio, and of course on the 9 o'clock TV news tonight. Morning Ireland will be on air from 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, and there will also be a special TV news programme on Storm Lorenzo here on RTE1 and on the RTE News Now channel tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.
And that's Thursday's 6-1 from all the team here. Have a very good and safe evening.
We're back at the same time tomorrow. Till then, goodbye.
Goodbye.